Hello and welcome to this video about the query store replay script. As a way of quick introduction, my name is Enrico van der Laar. I am the developer of the query store replay script, and in this video I am going to show you how you can use the query store replay script to replay your query workload on a Microsoft SQL Server database against another database using the query store. The query store replay script is a PowerShell based script, and basically it allows you to replay the query workload from one database to another. There are some options in there as well to compare the duration times of the queries in different databases and to check if different execution plans were generated among some other options. The query store replay script heavily depends on the query store feature. And the query store feature is a new feature introduced in SQL Server 2016. And it's basically the flight recorder of your SQL Server database. It records all your queries that have been executed. It records what execution plans have been generated. And it records a lot of runtime metrics about those queries. So you can analyze and directly identify bad performing queries. Best of all, the query store replay script is 100% free and it's completely open source. If you go to the website querystoretools.com, you can find all kinds of solutions I've built upon the query store, and they all link to their respected GitHub page, and every script is completely open source. So you can download it, you can modify it any way you wish, and you can redistribute it any way you want. So let's take a look. What do we need for the query store replay script? Well, since it's depending on the query store, we absolutely need Microsoft SQL Server 2016 or higher. Our source database needs to have the query store enabled. And we'll need the SQL Server Management Objects, or the SMO, which automatically are installed if you install the SQL Server Management Studio. And the script is built in PowerShell 4.0. There are some additional parameters we'll look at in this video, and they will also require you to have the query store enabled on the target database as well. So, to demonstrate the usage of the query store replay tool, we're going to take a look at a use case. And in this use case, I'm basically going to test what the impact is of my query workload when I change the compatibility level of my database. And to create a scenario that I can demonstrate this behavior, I installed one Microsoft SQL Server instance, which is 2016 SP1, with two databases. Database A, which has SQL Server 2012 compatibility mode, and Database B, which has 2016 compatibility mode. Because I want to show you some of the advanced features of the query store replay script, I've enabled the query store on both databases. Both databases are also identical with schema and with row data inside of them, and they're basically just a copy of the Microsoft AdventureWorks database, which you can download for testing purposes. So this is my SQL Server 2016 instance, and as you can see, I have two databases like I mentioned before. Database A, which has a compatibility mode of 2012 or 110, as you can see here, and Database B, which has the compatibility mode of 2016. And actually checking your query workload against different compatibility levels of your database is one of the use cases Microsoft mentions as well as a really useful use case for the query store, because you can directly monitor the influence the compatibility level has on your queries. So what I also have here in this window is a little example. So in this case, I'm going to generate some load for the query store. And this is the queries that we are going to replay using the query store script. So I'm going to switch to database A. I'm going to clear the query store. And I'm going to perform three simple queries. And these are just example queries. The results don't really matter, but they're just there to generate some workload that we're going to replay against database B. And finally, so everything's a little bit more clear and we're not confronted with many queries that need to be replayed against database B, I'm going to clear the query store of database B as well. So I'm going to run the script, and then we're going to switch over to the PowerShell window, which I have here. And as you can see, I already have one of the command lines ready. So before we're going to kick off the query, I want to quickly explain a few of the parameters that you'll see here. So as you can see, I have the query store replay script here. I'm going to execute it, and I have a couple of parameters filled in. The first few, or the ones you see here, are mandatory. You need to fill this in for the script to work. So we have a source server, in this case localhost, because I'm running it on the same machine. And we need a source database, which is database A target server, which is also localhost, since both databases are in the same instance, and we have a target database of database B. So far, really easy. A source and a target where we're going to replay against. The final parameter is the time window, and the value you enter here dictates the amount of time the queries, the script is going back in time to grab the query workload from your query store. So in this case, I supply the value of 1. This means that all queries captured by the query store in the last hour are going to be replayed against database B. So let's take a look how this works. I'm going to execute this query, which should be fairly fast. It's done. And I'm going to execute the query store replay script. It's done. There is no results yet. What this has actually done is it has created a couple of folders and a log file in your My Documents folder. By default, it will create a new folder in your My Documents called Query Store Replay, and it will write a log file there. There is another parameter you can use to change the location where the information should be stored, which you can find on the website where all the parameters are being discussed and described. But what I want to show you is what happened when we executed the script. So we're going to skip the log for a little bit. Let's look into the folder Query Store Replay. And as you can see, we have two folders here: extracted plans and replay queries. One that's very interesting is the extracted plans folder. And here we have all the queries, or all the execution plans, I should say, that have been extracted from the query store of database A. And these are all valid SQL plan files. So basically, you can open these with your favorite execution plan viewer. In this case, I'm using Management Studio, and you can look at the execution plan. As you can see, it's just the execution plan as it was executed on our source database. The other folder, replay queries, is actually a .sql file that will be replayed against the target. And as you look inside, you'll notice that the query is inside of this file. This is what the query store replay script will replay against your target database. So basically what it does is it will extract all the execution plans from your source database. It will shred the XML files. So it will grab the query statement, it will grab parameters, and it will generate .sql files that will be executed by the script against the target database. We can see what the script does exactly by looking in the log file. And I got one here. So what we see here is that the query store script started. It will return to you all of the parameters you supplied. And it will show you how many execution plans were extracted, how many SQL statements were extracted from those execution plans, if any parameters were extracted, and it will notify you that it started replaying 5 queries. Now in this case, you can see it replayed all 5 queries successfully, and all of the queries were successfully replayed. There weren't any queries with errors, so the script finished successfully. Now basically what we did is we executed these queries against our other database. So if we go to the query store built-in reporting, and I'm going to use the top resource consuming queries report, we should be able to see some of those queries here. And as you see, this is actually one of the queries we executed, just like this one and this one. As you can see, it generated the queries, it replayed the queries. Now all of this is pretty cool. There is a specific option also available, which is the export only feature. And what the export only feature does, it only extracts all the execution plans and queries, but does not replay them. So if you want to export all of your execution plans in the last hour directly from the query store, for instance, you can use the export only parameter. All right. Let's go into something a little bit more advanced. And let's go to the features that were introduced in the latest version of the script, version 1.2. And these provide way more functionality. These are the two parameters: the plan consistency, the compare perf, and include statements. And what these parameters do, the plan consistency one, is that it will check if a different execution plan was generated on the target server compared with the plan on the source server. So this is really, really useful. If you run this, set this parameter to true, you will get inside your log file an overview of all those queries that generated a different execution plan on the target. And this is helpful, especially in this use case where we are dealing with a difference in compatibility levels, because you can quickly identify what happened to your queries if you change the compatibility level. And you can plan accordingly. So if you know some of your big queries generated a different plan when you change the compatibility level on your target database, if you know this, you can impact the behavior of the query after migration by forcing an execution plan through the query store, for instance. Or you can accept it if the query performance is better with the newly generated plan. But this one will easily help you identify which statements generated a different plan. All of that information is still in the log file when we're dealing with plan consistency. So that's why the compare perf parameter is really handy. What the compare perf parameter basically does, it will grab the execution time of your query on your source database. It will replay the query, and it will measure the performance of the query or the duration of the query on the target database, and it will return that information to you in a table. So this is really helpful because you can immediately see how your queries performed on your target database without the need of opening query store reports. So when you execute it with this to true, you'll get a table returned. You can quickly identify the performance of your different queries, and you can see which query performed better or which query performed worse on the database that has a different compatibility level. I've also added the include statements, and I set it to true parameter. And what this one basically does, it will add the first 100 characters of the query text to the table that is returned by the compare perf parameter. So to see how this works, I'm again going to run our script here to clear our query stores and to execute the same 3 queries and clear the query store of the target database as well. Again, this is not necessary, but it makes it a bit easier to see the different results in the table, because else we would have tens or hundreds of queries and we'll have to, and things can get a little bit overwhelming on the return screen. All right, that's done. Let's run this script. All right, it's running, and here we are. So this was pretty quick because we didn't have a lot of queries, but this is interesting. So what we're seeing here is, first of all, the query statement, because I supplied the parameter to include the statement. I can see this is a select statement. I can immediately see the duration on the target database. This is in microseconds because the query store stores its duration information in microseconds. And I can see the information on my source database, the duration. And as you can see, this query performed a bit better on the target database compared to the source. I also returned some additional information, like the source plan ID and the source query ID, and the same for the targets. So these are easier to track using the reports. So for instance, on my target server, the query had an ID of 2. I can go back to my reports here on my target database, which is database B, and I can see we're talking about this query because this is the query ID and this is ID 2. And as you can see, the duration was 4.51. which is basically the same. So the reports show you the information in milliseconds, and the query store replay tool just uses the time as it is stored inside the query store. So that's in microseconds. So another thing I would like to point out is this little star here. If you enable the compare perf parameter, queries that have a star next to them are queries that generated a different execution plan on the target server. So again, this is just for easily identify those queries. These queries use the same execution plan on the source and on the target, but this one generated a different plan on the source compared to the one on the target. So this information is again also logged in the query store replay log. In this case, we see that 5 execution plans were extracted, 5 statements. Plan consistency is set to true, so it indicates it's going to do a plan comparison. And what you see here is a little info message. If one of the queries does have an inconsistent plan on both databases, you'll see the file of the query which generated the different execution plan. So let's take a look at that file, which is just in the replay queries folder. It starts with this one. So this query, this replay query generated a different plan on the target database than it had on the source. So this is really helpful to know. Again, it shows you that all of the queries were successfully replayed. So this is good. So let's close this. And let's take a look at the different execution plan that was generated, because that one might be interesting. I'm going to use my database A, and I'm going to look at the report, and I'm going to look for the query. And the ID on my source server was query ID 2. So that's this one. And I'm going to look at database B reporting, and there it received the ID of 6. Let's see, query ID 6. All right, let's open this up a bit. So the reason why it generated a different plan, if you look very closely, it switched the index around. So in this case, we have a clustered index seek here on this index, on the business entity ID, and a person, this one uses the person, the primary key person, business entity, so employee versus person. On the target, and on the source, it uses the person here and the employee here. So basically, what happened on the target database is that it switched these two operations around, as you can see. So the script detects that. So it detects a different execution plan was generated, and it returns that information in your window. So this was a very short example on how you can use the query store replay script. As you can see, it's really easy to use. You supply a few parameters, a source database, a target database, and servers, and the query store replay script will grab all of the queries stored inside the query store within the supply time segment and will replay it against the target database. With different parameters that I've shown you, the compare perf parameter or the execution plan consistency parameter, you can easily identify queries that behave differently on the target than they did on the source. So either if they had a different duration compared to the query on the source database, or did they generate a different execution plan, which is incredibly helpful when you change or want to test your compatibility level of your target database, or maybe when you added some indexes to tables. So it's great for those use cases, like measuring the impact of changing compatibility level, measuring the impact of changing your indexes. So there are a wide array of different use cases where this can be helpful. And again, you can download the Query Store Replay script for free at www.querystoretools.com. And it's open source, like I said, it's free. It's very documented. So all different parameters are described, their function, what they do, how you can use them, what values you should use with them. and everything is available through the QueryStoreTools.com. You can change the script any way you want, so if you have any suggestions, it's on GitHub, so make a fork and make the modifications and play around with it. I'm sure you'll find something you can use from the script. Well, thanks for watching to this video where we demonstrated the use of the Query Store Replay script. It was a very short video. We just shown you one use case, but as you can imagine, many possibilities are there to use the Query Store Replay script. I encourage you to play around with it, give it a try, and let me know what you think. Just check everything out at www.QueryStoreTools.com, and there you will also find some other solutions I developed for using with the Query Store, like the Query Store dashboards and the SP WhatsApp Query Store, and you can download those as well since they're all free and open source. Thank you.